Jesus. All right. Well, hello, and welcome everybody to Arizona History Happy Hour. Why, today is Thursday, May 28th, and we're ready for some fun. We're going to have all kinds of fun. We, of course, have our trivia, and tonight it's going to be with my friend Kim as we talk about the Eisendrath House, which is an amazing spot, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So a little bit about Arizona History Happy Hour. Basically, we started this, the end of last month as just a way to help create a educational diversion from what everyone's kind of doing, and to help tell some of those stories about Arizona that people may not realize, and to just kind of share the love and the wealth of this amazing state. So let's see, let me bring... All right, why isn't that working? Aha, there we go. All right. So again, welcome everybody. I'm glad you're all joining us. Now I know we have folks from across the state joining us this evening. So I want to give a special shout out to all of you new listeners who haven't really seen this before. So a little bit about the format. So what we'll do is, of course, we have our cocktail, which we'll get to in just a moment. I'll give a little intro about why or how I'm doing this, as well as then we'll do some trivia. And the best part about trivia is it's multiple choice. So even if you don't know the answer, you've got a 25% chance of guessing correct. And then with Kim, we'll go through the answers and explain why each one, that's the answer. So that way you'll leave knowing more than when you came into it. Now, also, we'll be chatting about, let's see, if you can see the green screen behind me, there's a iconic Phoenix restaurant that's no longer open. We'll be talking a little bit about, as well as Dragoon, Arizona. So we've got a full plate of fun tonight. And so now, this show would not be possible without support from folks like you, and as well as ARP. So the coronavirus continues to affect us all. We may be apart, but we're not alone. ARP is here in Phoenix and Arizona, providing information that can help you and your family. You can go to arp.org/AZ to find out some of the resources available from ARP. Now, if you would like to contribute to this program, my Venmo is right up above on that top line. You can find me that way. I also do PayPal. So that's Marshall Shore. So there's lots of great ways to help support this program. Uh-oh. Alrighty. There we go. All right, sorry about that. All right, so my name is Marshall Shore. I'm also known as the Hip Historian. Now you might wonder, how does one get a name like the Hip Historian? Well, about 20 years ago or so, I was working in a library in Brooklyn, and it was the middle of winter. It was really cold, and I knew it was time for a change. So we loaded everything I owned into a big orange cube, a U-Haul, and their international world headquarters are right here in the Valley of the Sun. And they started right here as well back in the 50s as people were trying to move, and they made it just a little bit easier. Now, when we got here, we moved into a 1956 ranch that was many shades of beige. I'm happy to say now that it is a much more simplified two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. And that's exactly what my kitchen looks like today, pretty much like it did back in 1956. Why, you'll see all those mahogany cabinets, as well as that buttercream yellow tile with the push buttons for the stove inset in the wall. Now, if you look at my oven, you'll notice that it doesn't look like your oven likely, because there's something missing in the door. And if you're gonna say a window, you would be correct. So if I want to check on a cake that I'm baking, I've got to open, but even more carefully shut it, because if it slams, what happens? It goes flat. And nobody wants a deflated cake. It's still good with ice cream, but still, it's not quite what you expect. Now, as soon as I got here from Arizona, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I knew every time I went somewhere on an adventure, I came across so many amazing stories. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we know and love today. All those GIs that either were stationed here, passed through on their way to somewhere else, and after the war, they were moving here in huge numbers. And in some cases, looking for a house just like mine. And then there's this man, which I know we're all happy about today. So this is Dr. Carrier, the inventor of air conditioning. So as it's getting into the mid-hundreds here, it's so nice to be able to hit a button and make things a little cooler. As well as the Phoenix New Times has named me Best Historian several years in a row, as well as Phoenix Magazine named me the Best Bespectacled Phoenix Celebrity, because I do indeed like my eyewear. Now, you might be wondering, what is Marshall wearing? Because I kind of developed a reputation for kind of wearing what I think looks good. And maybe you may not, but that's okay. So, every year we have a celebration for ourselves, Statehood Day, February 14th. And a few years ago, in 2012, we had an amazing celebration across the entire state. And they even did some really cool stuff down at the state capitol. They had a huge stage set up with all kinds of speakers, and someone gave me 15 minutes to talk about anything I wanted to. And I chose to talk about one of my most favorite events that most people don't know anything about and have never even heard of. It was started back in 1926 by Charlotte Hall, who was our first poet laureate and actually wound up living in Territorial Governor Mansion up in Prescott. And you know what? If you make your way there, you can go visit her house and go look at all her collection, as well as other information about the history of the area. Now, the event she put on was called Mask of the Yellow Moon. It was based on a legend about how the god of sun would give his rays to make the earth golden and warm, and things would grow. So it was always a springtime event. Why, in fact, that first one was very much like a flower show, but from there it grew and grew and grew. So it started off right here at the Algebra Shriners Temple, which is just down the street from the Capitol. It then moved on to Montgomery Stadium, which was Arizona's first stadium. And from here, there were so many cool events, including our very first bowl game. It was called the Salad Bowl. Now, I sure wish somebody would bring that back, because I would probably go and watch that game. Now, what would you expect from the Salad Bowl? Why, none other than a queen of the Salad Bowl writing in her very own salad bowl. If you look close, you'll see her spoon and fork that she can serve with. Now, the tickets, they actually held tickets at the gate for people from small towns across Arizona, because it was touted right up there with Mardi Gras as something that everybody should go see. It was that big of a deal. Now, you'll see it cost only $1. And it ran from 26 to actually, this was the last year, it was 1955 when it was held at Montgomery Stadium. And sadly, we lost that stadium in the mid-90s. Now, it was put on by Phoenix Union High Schools. So it had all the high schools involved. So you had the curriculum was woven in through this. So you had the debate club doing skits. You had multiple marching bands, really large sets. I've got a story about a guy, him and his friends would steal a little bit of that and drag it back to his carriage house, and they would put on plays throughout the rest of the year in front of it. And then it was famous for dance. I actually, before the event at Centennial, we had about a dozen women together, all talking about what it was like to be a part of the Mask of the Yellow Moon. And it was really a rite of passage. It was the moment where so many of these young women got out of themselves and felt they were part of something much larger than just an event. As well as they got to don costumes designed by students and made by home ec. And I was lucky enough to find a few dresses and a box. And so I was able to talk 3 of my friends into donning those amazing dresses. Those are all late 30s dresses. And you might have guessed I'm not a good wallflower. So I needed something that would stand up to those dresses. And so I talked to my friend Glenn, this was last year. He was indoctrinated into the Arizona Sign Association. They had their annual luncheon and had 10 people go into a Hall of Fame for the first time. So he was a sign designer that rolled into Arizona in the early 50s and worked on such signs as the My Florist sign over on 7th Avenue in McDowell, as well as many other signs that are still standing. And this is the suit coat that he created. It's an homage to the Arizona state flag. And I think he did a really great job. Now, one of the reasons I always tell this story is because I can go various ways with it. But one of the really cool things was a lot of my best stories come from people who are just sharing information with me. And I was doing a presentation for a group called the Arizona's First Families. And after I was done, a woman came up to me afterwards and said, let's go out to my car. I want to show you something. And so she pulled this beautiful dress out, covered in these bright butterflies. This was her mother's dress that she wore in the Mask of the Yellow Moon. And what was great was she also had the programs. It was either 1928 or 29. And I didn't get a chance to really flip through those to see exactly what number and what year that dress was worn in. But I sure do hope to get another chance at that. And, it is indeed called Arizona History Happy Hour. So let's see. All right. So tonight our cocktail is called, the Dusty Rose. So, when Kim was like, let's do this cocktail. I know rose water is a big Middle Eastern thing. That's actually where I had to go to get my rose water. But when I went to go get some vodka, oh my gosh, there were all these different flavors or different brands of rose flavored vodka. So I guess it's kind of like the new it drink. So let's see. All right. So we need to do 1.5 ounces of our citrus vodka. And you can use any flavor you would like. I'm using a lovely little orange. And then we have some Cointreau or orange liqueur. And we're going to put a little more in there because it's tasty. All right. And then we need a little bit of lemon juice, so we'll pop that right in there as well. And then, of course, finish it off with a little bit of cranberry juice. And then, just to make it our dusty rose, we have our rose water, and we're going to put just a little bit of that in there. I mean, you can already tell how fragrant it is. Oh my gosh, that smells so good. And we'll just mix that up a little bit. And look at that. There we have our Dusty Rose cocktail. And nobody wants to see my bar, so we'll get rid of that. All right. So here we are with our Dusty Rose. Oh my gosh, that's so tasty. You were so right, Kim. All right. So through the miracle of modern technology, I am happy to say that we have a very, I know, isn't that, it's such a beautiful color, Nikki. Look at that. So through the miracle of modern technology, we are able to bring right to you. Now, let's see, let's actually do that. All right. Well, hello, Kim.
Hello, Marshall. How are you?
I am good. How is your cocktail?
Oh, it's excellent.
I know. It's like everyone's talking about what a great color it is.
So when we opened the Eisendrath House, which we'll get into more, this was the signature cocktail.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And many people have used the recipe during events at Eisendrath.
Very cool.
So I toast everyone this evening.
Indeed. So cheers.
Cheers.
So, you know, it's like a couple of years ago, I was actually working with the city of Tempe. We did a variety of videos talking about, with tourism, about places in Tempe that were really interesting and had good stories. And as soon as they said, you know, we'd like to work with you, I was like, oh my gosh, we have to do the Eisendrath House because it's such an amazing place with such an Arizona story. And so that's indeed what we're going to do tonight. So, Kim, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Eisendrath House? I know we've got our trivia coming, so don't give away too much.
Okay. All right, great. Many people have driven by this two-story Pueblo adobe-style mansion for years. I will not give out that number yet.
That was me. That was me. I was one of those folks driving by going, yes. Oh my God, what is that place? Why can't I go?
And it has an incredibly rich history. It had approximately 4 groups of occupancies, families or individuals that lived in the house over its period of its life. And so in the year 2000, the city of Tempe and a group of local community leaders decided that they had to restore that house to save that house because it really was, by that time, pretty much a ruin. The worst thing that can happen to adobe is that the ceiling, there's a crack in the ceiling and water seeps into the walls. So parts of the house really had melted. And so the project began, and under the leadership of the Rio Salado Foundation and many, many, many community volunteers, Tempe Historic Preservation Foundation, the money started to be raised in 2011. And so there were many different activities going on. It actually took a long time to restore it. Again, that's in the trivia questions. So we'll get into some of that. But the nice thing is that it is a historic icon and a point of pride for the city of Tempe. It is what we call the Eisendrath Center for Water Conservation, which makes it completely relevant. Historic houses standalone are not sustainable. So having the city of Tempe and this being on their property, part of the house also, we built a state-of-the-art teaching classroom, and we call that the SRP Water Education Facility, and it's used by groups all over town and people that come in from out of town. It's a public place and can be used at no cost.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, it's really a fascinating history project. It's relevant because of its location near the Salt River.
Right.
We tell three stories. We talk about the woman who built the house, her tenacity in her 60s that loved the Southwest from Chicago area. And we talk about the really, really famous architect, Robert Thomas Evans. And there's more information about him. And then we talk about sense of place and how important the Salt River was to the valley. And in the 20s, this house was built in 1930. And so there was not much happening except a lot of agriculture in the area. So we'll get into more about that.
All right. So with that, who's ready for some trivia? Now remember, all of our trivia is multiple choice. So that way, even if you know the answer, just take a guess at it. Now you can either keep track of it with a pen and paper at your home. You can type your answer here into, I know, Nikki, yes, it's time for trivia again. And I know you're going to stick with it. But I have a feeling about this one. I think you're going to go do good on this one. And so it's a way we can also tell some really cool stories. So what'll happen is we're going to go through 10 questions. And then after that, we will go through and Kim will explain the answers. So that way we'll all learn more about that amazing Eisendrath House. So, all right. So question 1. Why was there such a surge of Chicago visitors during the 1920s coming to Phoenix? Was it A, the Wild West? Was it B, all the new hotels are being built here? Was it C, the threat of war in Europe? Or D, the movie industry? Why were so many Chicagoans coming right here to Phoenix in the 20s? All right, question 2. What local new hotels were completed in the 20s and turned Jewish individuals away? Was it A, Camelback Inn, B, Biltmore Hotel, C, the Westward Ho, or D, the Phoenician? Which one of those new hotels turned away Jewish individuals back in the 20s? The historic Eisendrath House was completed in 1930, which means how old is the Adobe Mansion? Is it A, 50 years old, B, 75 years old, C, 65 years old, or D, 90 years old? How old is the historic Eisendrath House? How much money was raised to complete the restoration? Was it A, did they not need to raise any funds? Was it B, was it $2 million? Was it C, $4.3 million? Or D, was it $8 million? How much money did it take the Eisendrath House to become the beautiful house that we see today? What is the main construction material that the historic mansion is made of? A, adobe bricks, B, wood, C, concrete, D, glass. What is the main construction material that the Eisendrath House is built out of? All right. What notable movie star in the 30s visited as a guest of Rose Eisendrath for some rest and relaxation? Was it A, Mary Pickford? Was it B, Betty Davis? Was it C, Joan Crawford? Or was it D, Buster Keaton? Which one of those movie stars got to hang out with Rose Eisendrath at that mansion? What year did the historic house open to the public? Was it A, January of 2016? Was it B, January of 2000? Was it C, January of 1990? Or was it D, January of 1930? When did the historic house open up to the public? Now, you know, we're coming to the home stretch. We're on question 8. What is the building being used for currently? Is it A, offices, B, visitor center and venue, C, storage, or D, Tempe's Mayor Mansion? Which one of those is the building currently being used for? All right, only 2 more questions to go. The architect, Robert Thomas Evans, did not design which building? A, the bell tower of the Jokaki Inn, B, Paradise Dude Ranch, C, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, or D, the Phoenician? Which one of those buildings was not designed by Robert Evans? I had to be sure I wasn't going to do a double negative there, which would have confused people even more than me. All right, and then we're at our very last question. And Blair may know the answer to this. I'm not sure. She threw a note earlier that said she used to party there in the 80s. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So what movie was filmed at the Eisendrath House? Was it A, Bikers vs. the Undead, B, Return of the Swamp Thing, C, The Women, or D, Thelma and Louise? Which movie was filmed at the Eisendrath House? All right, so we'll give people a few minutes because I know there's a bit of a lag depending on what service they're using. So I know Facebook can kind of sometimes be behind YouTube and Twitch. So I think it's a great time that Kim should have a little cocktail.
Here we go. All right.
Indeed.
Let's go this direction.
I know. It's so funny with the like the mirror image. It's like I'm like, oh, good thing I don't have to rely on that to get it to my mouth. Otherwise, I'd be wearing it. But all right. So who is ready for some answers? All right. So why was there such a surge of Chicagoans coming to Phoenix in the 1920s? C, threat of war in Europe. Really?
And I'll elaborate on that. After World War I, in the end of the 1900s, early 1900s, before 1920, and then World War II, which started after the 30s, many Europeans or descendants from Europe or immigrants who had lots of family in Europe would visit Europe all the time. That was their vacation land, especially wealthy Chicagoans, Midwesterners, and Easterners. It really was kind of their vacation land. And so during that time, there was that threat of war. And that's why we believe there was also that draw of the Wild West, of new places, new frontiers. And I mean, all of the above really work. There were new hotels being built that would cater to tourism. So actually, the impetus was that they had to find a new place for vacations, winter vacations, going to a different climate. That was one of the draws for Chicagoans as well. Everybody is pretty much aware of the Wrigley Mansion and the Biltmore Hotel. And, you know, there were lots of Chicagoans that were pretty much brought by industry and Mr. Wrigley, and the story continues on, and then Rose Eisendrath and Jesse Benton Evans, and then Robert Evans, and in his very flourishing career as an architect. So there was an enclave of Chicagoans, which there still is. People that
Indeed. All right. What local new hotels were completed in the 20s and turned away Jewish individuals?
we have we listed all of those hotels as potentials. Not one hotel will really claim that they turned Jewish individuals away. But we do believe it was the Biltmore Hotel, because in downtown Phoenix at the Arizona Jewish Museum, there are photographs of the placards as you would approach the check-in desk that says no Jews and no blacks. So we do know that as a fact, but we kind of play lightly when we tell the story that there were all these new hotels opening, and it could have been all of them, but we have some visual proof that it was the Biltmore Hotel.
Well, and it's so funny. So I've got a friend who I was chatting with, and she was talking about how in the 50s, she went to go have lunch with a Jewish celebrity, and she said they had to go to the Biltmore because that was the only hotel that would accept them.
Wow. And there
So
you
I was like, so yeah, so it's like at that moment I was like, oh my gosh. So that is the fabled hotel that Rose helped change.
Well, and we do know that Rose came here and stayed at places. So the Westward Ho was probably one of the hotels that she may have stayed at, but she was basically turned away. A lot of people from Chicago were coming. Jesse Benton Evans was building a palazzo villa at the base of Camelback Mountain and inviting people to stay with her during those times. So when Rose just had the opportunity to, once she said, I'll just build my own little resort, which she did.
Now, I've also heard a rumor that she then invited the manager of the hotel to her house for dinner.
That's correct. The story is, and it's told by the biography of Jesus Carrera from the Scottsdale area, which was her close friend. Basically, she did invite the innkeeper, whatever they call it, the manager of the hotel, to dine on her upstairs outdoor patio, and to have entertainment. And she did use the family of the Mexican Americans that worked for her as her servants, and she brought her own servants from Chicago, but she would have the Mexican Americans tell stories, play music, have poetry, and she loved that. But yes, she invited the innkeeper that had turned her away because she was such an open, giving person, and discriminated against herself, but did not to others.
All right, so on to question 3. So the historic Eisendrath House was completed in 1930. How old is the Adobe Mansion? And the answer is D, 90 years old.
Which is pretty amazing that a structure like that would survive that many years. The stories are that there were I went to the State Historic Preservation Office one day for some reason, and I asked this incredible older gentleman, I said, why do you think that Rose Eisendrath built so far in pretty much North Tempe, but really South Scottsdale, South Phoenix? And he said, oh my gosh, dear, it was because of deed restrictions. Jews couldn't stay in hotels, and then when they wanted to build something, they were pretty much banished to the North 40 or the South 40, whatever you want to call it. So we do know that there were several Jewish homes built in the area. Once Rose's, and I believe Robert Evans may have had a hand in building a few of those, and they were friends of his family, his mother. But there were several structures, not maybe quite as big as Rose's, but we do have stories of the family that lived there up until the early 70s about the other Jewish woman across the way who lived in a big adobe house as well. in that area. So 90 years for this particular house to have not been bulldozed. I do know that if people remember back in the late 70s, 80s, there was a tennis ranch, which is now the sanctuary.
Right, Gardner's Tennis Ranch. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. John Gardner's Tennis Ranch. I actually had the privilege of staying there when I was growing up. But they wanted to build a second one on those 9 acres of pristine desert preserve. And that was a story that we heard that that the city owned the land, and they did for a long time. Actually, they bought the land in 1999. They purchased it from the person who had rented it out since the early 80s. Actually, the 70s and the 80s, it was rented. And we did have a local artist, Jeff Ziske, and his wife, who lived in the house, and it was called the Oblique Gallery for over 20 years, almost 20 years. He moved in 81, and basically the city bought the house in 99 and sealed it up and started the restoration in the year 2000.
Wow. All right. Oops. Question 4. How much money did it take to complete the restoration on the Eisendrath House? C, 4.3 million. I mean, and actually I was looking and I found a really good photo of kind of
what it looked like in 1999.
Yeah.
There's so many people, and I do know Jeff Ziske, and I've toured him through the house, and he has a personality larger than life. And he lived there with many different artists coming through there, and he represented some of the new emerging artists in the 80s and the 90s. And it's funny how we look at this, and this is what it looked like when he basically was told, sorry, you can't live here any longer. And because he wasn't improving the house, making improvements to it. He was just a renter. And the great room was the gallery for the Oblique Gallery. And I was there in the 80s, and amazing people like Mark McDowell, Ed Mell, many local artists came through the Oblique Gallery. And I always tell the story when I tour that during the 80s, the Oblique Gallery started. It really was Art Walk before Art Walk was. And it was the Friday night. You wanted to highlight the local current artists. Of course, everybody was starving in those times. Things were for sale. There was no charge to get in, that kind of thing. But it was kind of a party central and an artist's mecca in the 80s and the 90s. But to see what it looks like now and where it was.
Yeah, it's night and day.
Literally melted in many places.
All right, question 5.
The 4.3 million. Should I go into that, or do you want to wait a few?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, if you want to go into that a little bit, sure.
Okay, so it took 15 years and $4.3 million to restore the house back to its what we call 1930s entertaining splendor. The money was raised through just about two handfuls of people, approximately 8 donors. Contributed the 4.3 million. And I always give credit when I tour the house to the Salt River Pima Indian community and the 12% give back granting program, because the SRPMIC really believed in this house because it was in Papago Park. It was close to Salt River, and we were telling the story of the history of the area. So they were big supporters. Salt River Project, also a big supporter. Short list, and I can't think of all the names right now, but we are grateful for the community. The city of Tempe owns the property and owns the house. It's on the grounds of the city of Tempe's water department. The glory of that is that the city maintains it, and if there's something going wrong or it needs to be fixed, the city comes in and takes care of that, which is wonderful.
Nice. All right. So question 5, what is the main construction material of the house? Now it's 64,000 feet or 6,400 square feet of historic adobe bricks. The answer is A, adobe. Wow. That's a lot of adobe.
It's a lot of adobe. We do know about Robert Evans, who was a brand new young architect, and he saw an opportunity that he could use local labor. He could use the adobe bricks, which were made from the mud in the Salt River, concrete and wood. There weren't. It was a very simple kind of reconstruction. Um, Not many buildings are two-story adobes, but this became one of his signature designs. And that Pueblo revival was very appealing to people that, about the Southwest and the Indians. And, it was a whole other thing. The picture that you're seeing right here are the adobe bricks that were made by the restorers. And they I'm sorry, I can't tell you their name right now, but they are like the adobe experts in the state. And when you have to go in and do restoration, they actually make the bricks from the original mud. So you can see how many bricks were needed at the time just to restore portions of the house. It wasn't every single wall, but there was a lot of damage to the house.
Wow. And and I love it. And in some ways, I mean, this style really became, if you go out to Sun City, you can see some of those like 60s brick houses that people have done this kind of adobe revival, which is kind of interesting. That it really became synonymous, I think, with just the look of the Southwest.
Oh yeah, and then you think about, Santa Fe, which was the original, and the Indians in the dwellings, and this really is, the way that Indians built their homes was through the mud and straw and bricks like this.
All right, on to question 6. So we're halfway through the quiz, and how are you doing so far? So question 6, what notable movie star in the 30s visited as a guest of Rose Eisendrath for some rest and relaxation? Why, it was Bette Davis, but I bet there were other celebrities that hung out there as well.
I am sure of that. And this little clip, which Marshall, you found it.
Actually, after you said that, I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that now.
That was a long time ago that we saw this, and what the copy reads as that, the movie star Bette Davis was invited to stay at the Eisendrath House from some R&R, and she left the set of a movie set in Hollywood and was summoned back immediately. So she wasn't able to stay as long as she wanted to, but it did make the local paper. And it had to have been in the 30s. But we say who might be some of the other notable people that came. The second owner didn't purchase the house until probably maybe late 30s and maybe 1940, 42, 41. It did sit empty for a couple of years after Rose's death in 1936, and none of her family really wanted the house. But the next owners, the woman was the granddaughter of the robber baron Jay Gould from New York. And so that unravels a whole nother history. We concentrate on Rose's story, but eventually we hope that we can focus on the 20 years that the Gould granddaughter, great granddaughter, and that children all lived in the house. And those stories are just rich and wonderful. And those people, both families who owned the house, were wealthy individuals, eccentric like individuals, and entertained a lot. And the stories about Joya Gould and her parties just go on and on. That's a whole nother episode.
All right. So question 7. What year did the historic house open to the public? It was January of 2016. And we already know what cocktail was served there. Why, it was none other than the Dusty Rose.
It was a wonderful community night. I think we had 250 people there. It was really wonderful to open that house up. Uh, there were several fundraising activities in the very beginning at the house when it was a ruin, like you saw the pictures earlier. There was a class of Tempe leadership who held the first fundraiser on the grounds, and they lit the grounds because they couldn't occupy the house for the fundraiser. So to get to 2016, when the city took over the house in about 2000 or 1999, 2000, that was about 15 years of fundraising to get to that point, 4.3. I do have to say that in 2008, the downturn, the economy downturn, it flatlined, it did sit empty for about 4 or 5 years. So we do know that it was, the last that was needed was to finish the inside and to finish all the grounds and all. And so when I came on with the Rio Salado Foundation, we needed to raise $1 million to complete the project, and we were able to do that and open to the public in 2016.
Wow. And Blair says she was logistics co-chair of that first fundraiser.
Blair is, when it comes to volunteers, there's no one like Blair.
There is not. She is everywhere.
She coordinated a group of, quite a few people. We worked our little tails off that night. We had an auction. It was really, really a lot of fun.
Nice. All right. Question 8. What is the building being used for currently? Why is it B? It is visitor center and venue.
And that is
what kind of events happen there?
Oh my gosh. I can just give you a variety of the events that are booked. And I say that we are reasonably priced and we're competitive with other Tempe area venues as far as the rental cost. It's a one-time fee. We have a list of caterers that are all wonderful and good and support us, and we support them. The types of events that we've had is we did have Tempe leadership graduation. We've had at least 4 or 5 nonprofit fundraisers that are held outside on the patios. Weddings, as you can see this one, that we probably do 4 to 6 weddings during our season. So it's very popular. It works great. It's an easy flip. It's amazing that you can have your reception out here and then you have your dance floor later on what used to be the pool on the south side of the property. So it's a popular visitor center and it's by appointment. We do have a hotline and people call, make a reservation. The Tempe Center or Tempe Historic Preservation docents are our docents. They wrote the program. They did a lot of the research on the Eisendrath family, and so we're pretty busy. By the end of, we were very sad because of COVID. We had to cancel 2 weddings, April 1 and April 1 in May, which I stated. I mean, you can just imagine somebody that plans all that long and then all of a sudden it's like, sorry, we're closed. We did do our very last event on March 13th, and the city shut down all public properties that day. But we went forward, and we were part of the Tempe, the Hayden Ferry Historic Days, Hayden Ferry Days, and we held a jazz notes night at Eisendrath to 80 people who rocked out to a wonderful trio of jazz musicians. It was a lot of fun, but that was the last activity we had there. Our season is November 1 through May 15th, and that's because, as everybody knows, it's very hot. We don't want to sell events when you can't use the outdoor patios, and so that's why we have that season.
All right.
So visitors actually can make reservations on the Eisendrath House hotline on Thursdays and Saturdays. We do hour-long docent-led tours, 10 a.m., and the last tour is at 2 p.m. You can call that hotline, make your reservation, and meet the docent there at Eisendrath House.
And we actually have that number on the screen after the quiz.
Great, thank you.
So that way they can write that down and find out how they can get a tour of this amazing historic mansion. All right, so question 9. The architect Robert Thomas Evans did not design which building? He did not design the Phoenician. Now, he did design that really cool building on the land of the Phoenician, but it was originally the Jokaki Inn.
Well, you know, this is the story. It was his home, the Jokaki Inn. I think I don't know exactly because I haven't read all that history, but he may have built it. And it was a tea room. And he and his first wife lived there. And they ran it as a tea room. I believe he divorced her and she continued to use it as a tea room,
okay.
or as a restaurant.
And then he also did build the Adobe Mission in downtown Scottsdale, is his work as well.
That's right. It's on the National Register for Historic Places, the Our Lady of Perpetual Help. I think that's the name of it. It's the Catholic church.
Exactly. Yeah.
Huge, Adobe complex. It's a pride of joy, I guess, for Scottsdale as well.
Now, when I was putting this together, I almost put in an answer as the incorrect or the correct answer for the not would be Arizona Biltmore. But I then discovered that he had actually built a pool structure out there that was demolished. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I didn't want to give out false information. I was like, oh, so I got to change my answer. So it was kind of a little bit of a trick with the Phoenician just because. So
we all know the Phoenician was not built until the 80s.
Right, exactly. So,
and it took the grounds of the original Elizabeth Arden Red Door Resort.
All right. So our last question, what movie was filmed at the Eisendrath House? It was A, Bikers vs. the Undead, which was a local production that had lots of local actors in it. If you go on YouTube, you can actually find a trailer for the movie. It's about, I think it's a few minutes long. I want to say maybe even like 6 minutes long. And I can't imagine the movie is that much longer than the trailer. So,
do you know what year that was, Marshall? I know
it would have been the early
Keith
80s.
knows.
I think it was the early 80s.
Yeah, I think so.
So it would have been that same time frame with Jeff was there, and it was part of that whole thing. I've got friends who were extras in it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to play a zombie. Or the undead.
And we did talk about this, Marshall, and I'll talk about this briefly. The undead. The first two owners, actually the first three owners, died in the house. Rose died on Christmas Eve, 1936, in the great room with her family surrounding. The second owner, Joya Gould, the great granddaughter of Jay Gould, and she actually died in the pool that was in the front of the house. In the front.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a great scandalous story behind that. And then
really,
her husband died of natural causes in the house as well. So I'd have to say in 2018, we did have a group of paranormal investigators come into the house, and they spent several nights there. And they do want to come back and spend a full 24 hours in the house. There's a lot of activity, and it was fascinating.
I know, because I know we have talked about trying to do an overnight there as well.
Right.
And so my friend Francine, who actually has done some ghost tours of Bisbee and things like that, is like, ooh. So yeah, so Francine, if we're able to organize that, would love to have you involved with that as well.
Great.
So, all right.
There's great possibilities for that.
Oh my gosh, there's so many amazing possibilities for that house. It's such a beautiful place and so much amazing history. So how did folks do? So I know that some of you, this may be your first time taking the quiz. I mean, hopefully the goal is that more that you learn something, then you realized what you didn't know, but now you probably know a lot more than you did going into it. And I know Nikki's always down on herself about, oh, I didn't do very well. And see, look at Carolee. She got 6 out of 10. That's great. So yeah, so see, people did really well on this one. So very good. All right. So I know I said this was be coming up. So if you'd like to make a reservation, on the screen right now is the open season, which is November 1st through May 25th. And the hotline you can call is 480-350-5700. And that way you can call. And I think now, Kim, can they call that number for events as well as tours?
Yes, what it is. And we also have a great website, eisendrathhouse.org, and a Facebook page, Eisendrath House Venue and Visitor Center. And the hotline, basically, it's a recording. You call, listen to everything that it says, and then you leave your name and your number and your requested date. And if you're interested in booking an event, you leave your name and number with that information, and the venue salesperson will get back to you.
Great. All right, Kim. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know we've talked about maybe having you back on at a future date to talk about maybe some small towns.
Oh, I'd love to do that. I really want to thank you, Marshall. You've been one of our best supporters and promoters of Eisendrath House. We really, really thank you. You did a tremendous Tempe tourism video, which was really, really great. And thank you so much for that. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell more people about that wonderful place.
Exactly. That's all about, is just getting people to be more aware of what's around them.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and have a great rest of your night, and enjoy the rest of your cocktail.
I will. Thank you.
Cheers.
Here's it. Thanks.
All right. So now we're ready for a little bit of Arizona music history. So, you know, one of the things I love is that we have such an amazing music history here in Arizona. And this would be Nancy Sinatra. And probably her most famous song is "These Boots Are Made for Walking." That was written by her friend Lee Hazelwood. Now, it's funny because it's like that was a song that he considered always to be a masculine song. It's one of those things that he would sing to himself behind the stage as he was getting ready to go on. And so he said, it's not really a girl's song. And so Nancy heard the song and fell in love with it and said, you know, it's really kind of harsh coming and abusive coming from a guy, but it's a perfect little girl song to sing. And so she did indeed sing that song, "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and really kind of made it into almost an anthem. And so it was such a huge hit that she scored 2 Grammy nominations for it. It's been covered by oh so many people, from Loretta Lynn to Nick Cave and oh so many more. Now, her and Lee Hazelwood were really good friends. They actually did an album together that doesn't get a lot of earplay, but I think it's well worth a listen because you can really kind of feel their relationship and how close of friends they really were. All right, so now we are going on to Little Arizona as we get a chance to talk about an amazing little town across Arizona. So we are Dragoon, with a population of 209 people. So the town of Dragoon is really located just off Interstate 10 between Benton and Wilcox. And the Dragoon Mountains that it's kind of in the foothills of takes its name from a U.S. cavalry troop that were known for carrying some unique firearms, and that's how they got the name Dragoon. Now it was also, and so there are those mountains. Now it was also had Dragoon Spring Stations, which was a place where mail was delivered from the late 1850s, including even the Butterfield stagecoach ran through there. Now the Texas Canyon that this is in, oh, and there's actually the footprint of that mail stop. Now the Texas Canyon that all of this is in is a sacred area to the indigenous folks who were there. It's also rumored to be the summer camp of the legendary leader Cochise for the Apaches. Now, if you do go visit, you'll be able to visit the Amaranda Museum, which was founded in the late 30s and has a great permanent collection, including Mata Ortiz pottery, but they also have guest exhibits and lectures, as well as a really amazing gift store from the local community. Now, also, if you go through, you'll find the Triangle Tea Historic Ranch. And if it looks like you think it should be in a Hollywood movie, you would not be alone in that. You've had such things as, Young Guns filmed there, Geronimo Tombstone, John Wayne did some movies there, Duel in the Sun, and 3:10 to Yuma, as well as some of the Lone Ranger movies were filmed there as well. Now, it's also, I would say, probably one of the most kitschiest things that is kind of in Arizona history. If you're traveling through other Arizona, through the southern part, you will see a sign called about the thing and how you're getting close to the thing and how you should stop and see the thing. And it is so worth stopping to see. I mean, this dates from the 50s, and I won't tell you what it is. It could be a mummy. It could be something else. But it's well worth just for the kitsch factor of saying you've seen the thing, as well as it's at a truck stop where you could replenish your batteries, get some gas, kind of just take a little respite from your long drive. And now we're on to our Hist-O-Cam. So there's a building over on like 23rd. Let's see. All right. So, and it was famous for being one of the toniest restaurants in town. And let's see if we can. Oh, and that's not working. All right. All right, so there we go. So this little guy right here is a lead knight on a horse. And this was one of the giveaways. If you had a birthday at the Green Gables restaurant, they would give you one of these little knights. Now, the Green Gables were known because they would have a knight out front to direct you to your parking space. And it was one of those very special places. I've actually got a friend, she gave me a napkin from when she went in the early 50s there for a meal. She kept the napkin and dated it. And so excited to be able to share. These are really hard to find because there's not many around, and they're so soft because they're made out of lead. But it really tells, I mean, just that whole area around it is called Green Gables. And what I love is the fact that the building still stands. I mean, if you're driving by, you will see, let's get rid of that. Let's put that up. So there's the knight. I was actually recently in a Facebook chat with a guy who said his brother was one of those knights. And so trying to find a time that we can connect and sit down and chat about some of those stories, because I bet he's got some great stories about being the knight that would guide you. And so here's what it looks like today. So you can see there's a big office building behind it, but that front building is the original restaurant for Green Gables. So happy that they saved some of that history. So now remember, if you have any stories to share or photos or any questions of things we should maybe research, maybe you know a really amazing town that we should take a look at. I mean, it's going to be kind of fun. I'm actually supposed to be working on a book called Little Arizona. And so this is kind of my first foray into looking at some of those small towns. Now, I also do work with the Arizona LGBT plus History Project, working with ASU and Phoenix Pride as we start documenting Arizona's past in the LGBT community. So I know we're working on a program that'll be coming up the end of next month, the end of June. So I'll give you more information as that gets more solidified. I'm also part of the Arizona Vintage Sign Coalition, and we have a lot of neon right here in Arizona. I'm also on the board of the Arizona Apparel Foundation, which works hand in hand with Fabric, as they have now started taking small batch manufacturing to working with PPE gowns for hospitals around the country. And as well as with local designers providing some of those services, as well as small batch manufacturing to small designers as well. If you would like to reach out and if you have a question, maybe you've got a story to share, because as I've said, that is honestly my best source of information. Now, next week, we will have a really good show. I'll let you know what's coming. It'll be really good. And, we will have a cocktail as well. So it will be the same bat time, the same bat channel you're watching it now, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, wherever. You can watch it right there again next week. And I do want to say thank you to those of you that have helped support this, because without all of you, it wouldn't be possible to keep this going. So again, thank you. Oh, no. And Nikki, thank you for noticing. No, actually, that's a new caricature I had someone draw for me. So I'm actually thinking of using that on a sticker or something. So, but yeah, so thank you all so much for being here. I do want to give a shout out to ARP Arizona for being a sponsor of Arizona History Happy Hour. And so with them, the coronavirus continues to affect all of us. We may be apart, but we are not alone. AARP here in Arizona provides information that can help you and your family. And if you go to aarp.org/AZ, you can find out about some of those statewide resources for you and your family. So again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening as we get a chance to talk about some fun Arizona history. And I will see you here next week as we get to do the exact same thing. And oh my gosh, thank you all so much. And I love the chat that we have going off to the side, because there's some really good things over there as well. So everyone, have a great rest of your night, and I will see you next week.